is us 2 years ago, or some of us. If you weren't actually there, a representative of your organization probably was there. And we had come together, we shared information, experiences. A lot of what Kerry has in her presentation earlier came from this sharing of information. And we also talked about what the problems were, and we came up with a vision of what we wanted for Pawi. So I just wanted to remind you of that collective vision that we came up with. So over the next 3 decades, the people of Trinidad and Tobago feel a great sense of pride in our Pawi, which will be non-threatened and flourishing, with sustainable populations throughout its original range, and its conservation and management will directly involve and benefit local, national, and international communities. So this is a big job to get us there. Yeah? But it just means we need to keep focused and work. And this plan that we all came up with, or started to come up with 2 years ago, will help us along that way. So this is some of the obstacles we looked at. You have this in your plan. I would like to point out, if you want to put it in, that this arrow here, there's supposed to be an arrow there. It should not be in your plan, so you can stick it in. So we see that we have some direct threats that we all know about, some natural threats, diseases, predators, climate variability, and then we have our anthropogenic or our human-induced threats, which the main one there is habitat destruction and illegal hunting of Pawi. As Kerry said, we're hoping that hunting is going down. We know in some places like around there, they've really reduced that hunting pressure over the years. And so we can see here as well how we other actions are leading into things like habitat destruction. Above that are things we're looking at that affect our ability to deal with these threats. So we thought that some of the main problems we had were nobody was funding a lot of the things that we thought were critical to getting these threats reduced. And if they were funding, they didn't want to fund administration, so we couldn't pay somebody to help organize a lot of these things. And it's very difficult, we all know, to volunteer your time for a long period to do this coordination. So that was stopping a lot of progress happening. There's a lack of political will and resources sometimes, which leads to unclear policy, it leads to a lack of real participatory planning, lack of enforcement. And then there are few viable alternative livelihoods that can allow community members to make a living in a way that doesn't impact the Pawi. So we took all of these obstacles into mind, thought about the vision, and we thought, okay, what can we do that can overcome these obstacles and get us to our vision? And we worked out our plan. So everything we talked about 2 years ago at Carney, we put into this structure here, just so we could more easily be able to understand and delegate responsibilities and that kind of thing. So we talked about a vision before. That vision got broken into 2 goals that I'll talk about. And each goal we broke it down into little objectives, so steps, core things that we need to do to make that goal happen. And then each of those objectives we broke down into actions, things that we need to do. Now, we need to continue breaking that down later on, but that is something for after we've started working on these things. The colors here hopefully will help guide you through what I'm talking about, right? Okay, so our vision broken into the 2 goals I was talking about. We have goal A is about the Pawi. We want the Pawi to be living in viable, self-sustaining populations throughout its natural habitat, North, Central, and South Trinidad, because we know that it used to be in all the forests in Trinidad, and we want it to be back there playing its role in those forests without us having to keep coming in and fixing. Yeah, so that's part. One goal is to make that happen, have them in all the forests in self-sustaining populations. Big goal, yes, we'll break it down. And the second one is about the people. So we want more people to be involved. We We want involvement by Trinidadians at all levels, at all age levels and all economic levels. We want the businesses and the NGOs to be involved. We want them to be involved in conservation of Pawi, and we want a strong link between conservation and sustainable livelihoods. Because there is a strong link between Pawi's survival and the livelihoods of people. So that's the two main things: Pawi, people. So we're going to deal with Pawi first. Okay, so we've broken goal A into 3 objectives. The first is, to save this Pawi, we need to know about it. And all of us have already been working on collecting scientific information, even if it's just reporting a sighting while you're out in the forest. Right, so we need to provide scientific knowledge that can inform management. Knowledge that could tell management what it needs to do, and that can also monitor what's happening. So if we make a plan and we're going ahead with our plan, we need to be able to monitor, is that plan working or do we need to change it? So we need to have knowledge, and then we need to keep monitoring, keep collecting that knowledge. We need to promote management that leads to increase in power, leads to a better habitat, so that you have a wider distribution, greater numbers, and not just a management that keeps it as it is, or even somehow reduces Pawi population. And then we need to review the existing legislation and see how much protection this law actually supposed to be giving the Pawi, and are there any gaps, are there any things that we need to lobby for, to recommend, to put into those laws, right? So, looking at the Pawi, we want to provide scientific knowledge, have good management, and have good laws. So I'm going to break these down now. I know this can be a bit much, so that's why you have it in your plan to go over again, and we have some question and answer again. Okay, so scientific knowledge. We want a complete distribution and population survey. It's such a nice, short little idea, but of course we know it's very difficult. I know a lot of you here were involved in distribution and population surveys to some extent. So we really want to know where these birds are and what kind of numbers they are across the country. We have a good idea in certain places, fairly good idea of where they are in certain places, but we really want a countrywide thing to be happening. And then while we're doing that, we also want to conduct ecological studies. We want to know what they're eating, how many chicks they have, how long the chicks take to grow up, what kinds of trees they need, what kind of water they need. Are bulldozers going to affect the ability to lay eggs, all that kind of thing. Then we want to assess the impact of those natural factors we were talking about to find out, are disease and climate variability and predators really having a big effect? Do we need to focus on addressing those things? Or is it okay to let those happen as naturally as they do and focus on the human-induced threats? And we need to be able to do these things. We have to develop a participatory monitoring program with the community members. I mean, we've recognized this for years now, we know this. We can't do this without the people of the community. They know the forest best, and they are there. And Guardian Life had been working with some of the communities. You all have done some of those surveys before. And so I think we have a baseline of what may be able to work, and we can tweak that and get something that can really work across the country. But again, it's something we need to look at. Okay, so scientific knowledge, we want to know where they are, how many they are, how they live, what natural threats affect them, how much it affects them, and we need to find a way to do this. Okay, so we're coming to management. We need to identify the places we want to manage Pawi habitat in. So what Pawi habitat do we want to focus our protection on, and how can we protect these areas or bring them back to a more natural state. We want to determine whether captive breeding is feasible. Is it possible for us to breed these animals in captivity? We also want to make sure that that it is necessary, which is where those monitoring programs would come into play. Do we have enough animals out there, and are they breeding successfully enough that we can leave them alone? Or do we need to bring some into captivity and help them out and then release? But we need to see if that's possible as well. Do we know enough to have a Pawi survive and lay eggs and raise its young, and then we release young that are able to survive in the wild? So we need to look at that. We need to make sure that people know where the protected areas are. So we need to mark the boundaries of the national parks clearly. That might be a forestry thing, with the help of the NGOs, I guess. I know right now some of us up in here, we may not know exactly what all our national parks and protected areas are, but it is something we need to look at. And the fourth thing here is engage hunters so that we reduce the killing of Pawi or stop the killing of Pawi. And even more than that, they become like you are, and they start being really interested in this and helping out in bringing information in that can improve the position of the Pawi. Okay, and the legislation, fairly simple. We have to look at legislation that affect the Pawi, so anything that's specifically Pawi related, and see if there are any gaps in that protection. And we need to look at the legislation that protects the habitats, so land use policy, and see is there anything in these land use policies and these laws that look at land use that can actually be going against Pawi conservation, and then we have to make recommendations to reduce these conflicts. Okay, so that there is one of our goals in many steps broken down. Okay? Our scientific knowledge, good management, and legislation.